Let's see. Oh, perfect.
Oliver.
Oliver as well. Oliver, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Great. Let's get started. So hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining today, joining our breakout session. Really great to see a great number of you turned up. My name is Felix. I'm Corporate Partnerships Manager here at Startup Autobahn Plug and Play Germany. And on behalf of our whole team, I would like to warmly welcome you to this very exciting breakout session, focusing on green, how to reduce CO2 emissions and reach net neutrality. So I think a very relevant topic, co-hosted together with our industry partners, BASF and Novelis. So I'm really looking forward to the session today. So at our Startup Autobahn Expo events, for everyone who's new to our events and our formats, we always try to answer some of the most challenging questions that our corporate partners are facing today. And even though, as we all know, the last months were strongly influenced by the COVID-19 pandemic, the topic of sustainability in all of its facets is still very relevant for every company, no matter from which industry. So especially as we find that companies sometimes follow slightly different approaches also in order to reach their sustainability goals and implement them into their net zero strategies. So in this session, we want to tackle the burning question of how companies can reduce CO2 emissions by driving partnerships and innovations while still facilitating the way that companies reach their goals as well. So therefore, I'm very excited to introduce you to our speakers today. So with us today, we have Suzanne Lindsay Walker, who's the Vice President Sustainability at Novelis. We have Oliver Geiger, Senior Manager Sustainability and Digitalization at BASF. And last but not least, representing one of our very exciting portfolio startups, we have Louise Müller-Hofstede, who is a client partner and focuses on the strategic development at our portfolio startup Circulor. So with that, I think we have the perfect experts with us today to discuss about this topic. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to Suzanne, who can maybe kick off a brief introduction round to introduce her company and introduce your goals in the sustainability space.
Sure. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening. Suzanne Lindsay Walker, I am thrilled to be a part of the panel today. And so Novelis, we are a leading producer of flat-rolled aluminum products in the world's largest recycler of aluminum in the world. And I am thrilled to be a part of the Novelis team. I'm 10 weeks old into the business, and it's already an exciting journey. So as a sustainability professional, I am thrilled to, we are, like I said, a leading recycler. It is a core component of our business because it requires approximately 95% less energy and produces roughly 95% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than manufacturing of primary aluminum. We have invested more than $700 million over the last decade to build out and enhance our recycling capabilities around the world. And over that same period, Novelis has developed a number of recycle-friendly alloys and has more than doubled our recycled content inputs, achieving 61% in our last fiscal year. As a result, we are the #1 operator of aluminum closed-loop recycling systems in the world. Our recycling program already sets global leadership standard, but we understand that our efforts need to go beyond. Our stakeholders are asking for more. And so, building on this leadership, our new sustainability targets aim even higher. And so, we announced in April our new ambition to be net carbon neutral by 2050. We do have an interim goal of a 30% reduction of carbon by 2026. So we have big goals, and we want to build on what we've done so far, and excited to share with you, how we go do that. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Thank you very much for the introduction, Suzanne. I think it's very clear that Novelis are already setting some great milestones in the sustainability space. I would like to hand it over to Oliver to say a few words on behalf of BASF.
Yes, thanks, Felix. As Felix introduced me, I'm in the sustainability for the transportation business of our Performance Materials division. When BASF, I guess, is known as the largest chemical company still. And we already have it in our claim, in our company claim. Yeah, we create chemistry for a sustainable future. So when we put out this claim a couple of years ago already, we had sustainability on our roadmap, and this really being an important topic. And even back in the 90s, we started to reduce CO2 emissions from our production. And relate to what Susanne said. Yeah, we are also a very energy-intensive industry in the chemistry industry, and well, that means that we have to invest also large amounts of money to become green there. So shifting energy towards green electricity, for example. So we just recently published investments in wind parks in the Netherlands, in co-investments in the North Sea. So we're really into that, and our newly established CO2 targets, they aim for minus 25% scope 1, 2 until 2030, and of course being net zero at 2050. And it's important to mention that if you compare to the 1990 reference, then BASF will have reduced already 60% of its CO2 emissions by 2030. So that's already a lot, but it's not enough. So it's a continuous journey.
Great, thank you very much. And Louise, what does that mean in a startup perspective?
Yeah, in a startup perspective, maybe I lose some quick words around what we do at Circulor, and then you might understand better my points of view. So Circulor is a software business headquartered in London. We've been founded 2017, so almost 4 years now. And what we do is we created a software solution that enables our customers to track their resources within the supply chain and sort of establish like an end-to-end picture from the mine to the manufacturer. And we do this for 2 reasons. So the one is to prove responsible sourcing claims, especially when it comes to mica and cobalt, but nickel and lithium as well. So either from an ethical point of view or an ecological point of view when it comes to CO2, but then also to support our customers in their climate neutrality objectives. Because once we establish like a traceability of our customers' resources, we can then provide sort of like a visibility of each supply chain participant and how their CO2 contribution looks like. So in the end, we are able to attach each batch, each product with a precise, unique CO2 intensity and provide an overview of the CO2 intensity, not only month per month, but also tier by tier. So you understand where in your supply chain actually the CO2 intensity sits. And that is us.
Perfect, great. Thank you so much for the introduction, all of you. I think especially in this session, it's so great to get the perspective from the industry partner kind of view, and then also from the startup space. So this is I think very helpful and very unique. So I want to talk about a business perspective and look more into the where your corporations stand. What are your ambitions concerning the CO2 reduction in the near future? So Susanne, you already mentioned that, of course, as a leading provider of low carbon sustainable aluminium, of course, you're already starting a hopefully successful recycling journey. But what does that mean in the near future? What are your sort of focus topics here?
Yeah. So, the ambition is amazing, right? But how you action it, what you actually do matters, the decisions that you make and, where you invest. So, it's where the rubber meets the road, right? And for us, we are absolutely convinced that our long-term success depends on us meeting these goals. And so, at a high level, circularity is key, is our pathway to decarbonization. And when you think about that in a, specifically what will we go do, when you look at it from a scope 1 and 2 perspective, we're going to work really hard to decarbonize our remelting processes, sourcing renewable energy, as well as on-site energy generation. We'll increase low carbon logistics solutions and use carbon-free coatings. Now, the majority of our footprint is in scope 3, right? And so it's in part of, our biggest levers is to further increase the capabilities and capacities to recycle. And reducing, primary aluminum will be key. innovating new high recycle content alloys will be key. And then creating and partnering and learning for implement new technologies, as well as to continuously optimize our processes. Mm-hmm. So saying it, sounds easy, right? But there is some tremendous challenges and opportunities that present itself when let's go, increase our capacity and capability. But if if we're honest with ourselves, the pain points, what are those and how do you overcome some of those? And so, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of some of the key levers, around scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3, that's what we're looking at and, looking to create new opportunities along the way and partner along the way.
Perfect. Great. Thank you very much. Oliver, what is it like from a BASF perspective, also as an absolute front runner in terms of a broad portfolio, also for your customer products? What are your views on this?
Yeah, very similar to what Susanne just said. Yeah, of course, Circulor is key. But it's a bit more complicated in our world of different chemicals, and because some of the chemicals you simply don't get back anymore. But those that can be recycled, we're looking for different approaches. Sure, when you look into the plastics industry, then mechanical recycling is the thing that you should do first, if somehow possible. But there is huge volumes around that you cannot simply recycle on a mechanical basis. So you have to go into the chemistry again. And there is exactly our focus, and we engage a lot in that. Generally speaking, of course, I mentioned that we go into green energy, and as the consumption of energy is huge in our business, it's not just about doing contracts, but also really investing money to build up further capacities. I guess that's also key that we engage ourselves there. Of course, it's the little things, the continuous efficiency increase in our processes, but it's also when we look into scope 1 and 2, some fundamental changes in technology in the future. So we're talking about a steam cracker, which is not longer operated with gas, but with electricity. That's a huge R&D investment and also investment if we build up this. And this also has a more long-term perspective. So we talk about probably in 10 years having this in production. But we see it's key, and at the same time, and that is targeting scope 3, we also have a carbon load coming into our value chain with the naphtha, with the oil. And if we want to get neutral there, we also have to substitute by renewable feedstock and by hydrogen chemistry. And of course, it should be then hydrogen made with green electricity. So that's basically it. And as Susanne said, it's a lot about partnerships and collaboration, because we have to involve the entire value chains in our different industries, and of course you cannot do these investments alone, and R&D.
Great, thank you. And Oliver, I mean, in one of our previous meetings, you mentioned that globally BASF wants to reduce the absolute CO2 emissions by 25% by 2030 already, compared to your emissions in 2018, which I think is really a remarkable goal. How does that sort of fit into your overall strategy? Is that something that has to be implemented into the strategy?
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course, that's implemented in the strategy, and as mentioned, achieving this minus 25%. That's more the state-of-the-art measures that we can do within the next 10 years. But then afterwards, we have another 75% that we have to reduce to net zero, and that's really then the more revolutionary approaches with new techniques and really completely different approaches. So that's really changing the paradigm completely in chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, thank you. Louise, maybe you can tell us a bit more how we can sort of support also the climate neutrality objectives in this context.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I also have to agree with Oliver and Susanne. And I think what I most agree with is that we have to look at that, what hurts, the pain points, because I mean, everybody's talking about sustainability, everybody's talking about what they want to do, what they're already doing, but I think it's also important to understand now that there are different levels of that, because otherwise sustainability becomes a very like inflational use of word. And so of course, I'm not saying that only the big things really matter. I think it's like an onion, you know, you have to first take off the first peel and then you go more into the core. And I think the first skins of the onion is, I don't know, switch to renewables, use new materials, change your processes. But then the Champions League is circularity and prolonging materials life and prolonging the life cycle. And that is key to retain the value you already have. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? You create new value with something you already have. And I think from our perspective, as a startup or as a scale up, conversations always start to be difficult when it's getting difficult. So when people say like, oh, but this is very difficult. And I said, yeah, but nobody ever said it's going to be easy. So I think that is sort of like the change of mindset. And we have to go there where it hurts. And I mean, creating partnerships sounds all very beautiful, but this is where it hurts, because this is something which hasn't been done before, where legal is coming in, where you start to do something collaboratively. And of course, with different visions, ambitions, and of course, there's always business behind that. I mean, we're not only doing this because we have to save the planet, but because it's also a business strategy, and that is fine. And I think we also need to openly talk about that. I think that the mindset should be that it is a massive task, and it will hurt. And in order to reach that Champions League, we have to go create the partnerships and really listen to each other and just try to make it possible.
Great. And I'm curious, what does that mean in a broader context? If we want to put this into action. So we heard a lot about the challenge now, the current situation. What does that actually mean when we want to implement it? So in this context, we hear a lot about scope 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the emissions. Suzanne and Oliver, you already mentioned it. And the efforts to reach a higher scope also in this perspective. But I'm curious, Suzanne, what's the current status quo? What do you think? Where do we stand in terms of a business perspective currently?
I just want to echo, first of all, what you said. We have to become, something I say is we have to get, comfortable with being uncomfortable and having difficult decisions and in conversations with each other. And there are absolutely hurdles to doing that, but nothing easy is left. It's all complex, so we have to roll up our sleeves and think differently, and so when I think about, I mentioned briefly, one of our biggest levers is, increasing the capabilities and the capacity to recycle. And in order to do that, we need scrap to go in. And since I'm talking, to automotive focused, folks, end of life scrap availability in the automotive space is critical, and so we have to collaborate with our industry partners. And we do already in the design phase to increase the recyclability, thinking about dismantling processes and machines to improve collection and sorting. We also partner and support communities and the governments to work on solutions that also increase the availability of end-of-life scrap, as well as new and innovative collection and sorting facilities and technologies. And this is where the real work is, right? But we all talk about collaboration, and like you said, it sounds great, but we know that we have to partner with all of our stakeholders, right, to further maximize circularity and to implement even more closed loop systems. And so again, in automotive, we've established the world's largest closed loop recycling systems to preserve the value of the alloys that we're producing, to reduce tailpipe transport emissions, and to establish a secure supply chain for automakers, right, and deliver the cost savings as well as sustainability benefits that are increasingly expected of OEMs and others. And so how do you build on that? Like these urgent topics that we have to have these difficult conversations around end of life. We have to champion regulation. We have to align as an industry with methodologies. in standards. We need to, government's regulation side of things. But I wanted to give two sort of specific examples that I think are really going to help unlock some of the value that we know we need to seek. And that's, partnering with folks like Startup Autobahn, collaborating and getting exposure to startups to help bridge knowledge and experience with different innovations. And Louise, you're part of that. We need to have a conversation, right? But it's also, challenging ourselves in a pre-competitive space as well. We started a nonprofit organization, with a competitor, with the idea to work on and provide innovative implementation-ready solutions that are going to advance the adoption of aluminum in the automotive body sheet, right? So we know that we can help OEMs by lightweighting and providing lower carbon solutions to them. But, from a Novelis perspective, we want to increase the size of the pie for the industry, not just increase the slice of the pie for us, right? And I think sort of that saying, we want to, rising tide lifts all boats. And that's really kind of the approach that we're trying to take. And again, to reiterate, Louise, your comment, it's difficult to have those kinds of pre-competitive conversations, but they need to be had. They absolutely need to be had. And we're sort of taking steps and pulling back that onion and really trying to be intentional about how we do that going forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Suzanne. And I think I can see there's also a question from the audience here to you, Suzanne, based on what you just spoke about. What is sort of the first step with startups to commit to a more sustainable solution? As you just mentioned, Startup Autobahn as a platform example. How can this fit into the strategy also, Novelis sort of standpoint?
That's a great question. And I think it's first of us sharing what our pain points are so that potential startups that are working on these unique and innovative solutions have the visibility to us and be able to address the pain points and have the conversation. So, I think about a couple of examples, continuing and reinforcing dialogue with, we have a scrap processing pilot with a startup called Tomra. Another pilot with Peakboard to set up intelligent data processing in our plants. Like these are all startups that we were connected to via the Startup Autobahn plug and play. So again, it's being honest and real in sharing what our problems are and presenting them to the universe of startups that are going to be able to help us think through this. So hopefully I answered your question, but it was an important question. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Maybe I can add to that just because I'm sitting on the other side of the table as a startup, and I think it's absolutely crucial to be honest with the pain points, as Suzanne said. But from a startup point of view, I think what is quite often a problem in those conversations with corporates is the expectation of budgeting. And it's nothing what is really being addressed in the beginning. Great conversations. It's cool what the startup does. It's innovative, and it's great to hear from the corporates around their challenges. But to really do something and execute something, and I can only tell from my experience, I'm often having wonderful, interesting conversations. And then when it comes about like really implementing something, really change, then the budget is not there. Or because it comes from, I don't know, the innovation or department, or sometimes even the marketing department, which is even worse. So it needs to come from procurement, from the core departments of the corporate, and that is just something to add, because that is something I find often in those conversations is we always have something to talk about, and we always find each other how we could help and collaborate with each other. But a request from my side, and I think some startups that are watching might agree with me, would be fantastic if some corporate could enter a conversation and saying, listen, this year we have a budget of, I don't know, 100K, 50K, 10K, doesn't matter. Could be also 10K. But then the startup actually knows, okay, in which direction are we thinking?
Perfect, thank you. And I think over to you, Oliver. I think as BASF, as one of our co-partners as well, you also initiated a lot of interesting projects in the past, also together with exciting startups. What are your views on that? How does that fit into the short term and then the more long term strategy to achieve your sustainability goals?
I guess what Luis said is important. Yeah, we have to be. We really have to talk about expectations in the beginning. If we talk about collaboration, and I guess we did that in the past, and we have really some very successful proof of concept projects initiated by Startup Autobahn. And what I see, I mean, we're a chemical company. Of course, we have guys doing digital as well now, departments even. But those super innovative things that come from the startups, you better do them directly with them. And for proof of concept, that's absolutely okay. How you implement that later into your business is a different story that gets complicated in huge companies. But that's anyways the second step. So I believe it's important that both sides they talk about expectations in the beginning, and also that that we that bring the solution to the market in the end again, that we clearly talk what we need. So that's really super important. And yeah, I believe those events like today, they really help to bring people together. One thing that I want to mention as well here is startups are important, but we should not forget about the small and medium enterprises that we have in the value chains, because this is a discussion we always have. How can they contribute to these super significant changes in the business, and the business models even that we will see in the future. So because we don't know, I mean, are we selling by the kilo in the future, or are we selling by the kilo and as well by the product carbon footprint? That is things that we have to discuss, and the SMEs, they play an important role there. So we have to involve them in these discussions. This is really something that we have to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Great, and I think there's also another question which I think fits in perfectly here, based on what you just mentioned. Maybe from both your perspectives, both the corporate side, and then Luis, maybe you can also share your thoughts due to the complexity of the topic here. Of course, where do you start? How do you initiate these partnerships, especially getting down to the crucial numbers involving all the relevant parties? What's the starting point here from both your perspectives?
I'm happy to start. Thinking back to the onion and its skins, I think it's important to structure ambitions and what is doable, and only talk about what is feasible now. And I think that is important to not only say, okay, now we have to decarbonize the entire supply chain. Yes, of course, at some point we want to decarbonize the entire supply chain. But now let's look at the resources that are CO2 intense. Let's look at the processes that are CO2 intense. And then go with a risk-based approach. Say, okay, what's the lowest hanging fruit? Here, I'm having a great relationship with this supplier, so maybe with him, I'm going to sit first tomorrow, and then with the more difficult one, or maybe even the unknown ones, and then next year. So, so this is, I think, that is the bridge of structuring it and go with what is possible, or more possible today than the very, very, very difficult things which you might approach in the future.
Mm-hmm. Great. Maybe we have. Exactly. Susanne, yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, so I was just going to build on what you shared, Louise, and I think of it as you think about prioritization, right? All the things you said are spot on, and when you're a big company like ours, we have people that are dedicated in big R&D groups that think about how to improve and tackle these challenges, right? And so, but we also have to be, also have to think outside of ourselves. We're very customer centric. What do our customers want? Do we have the ability to drive those kinds of changes and product innovation, development, et cetera? Or, and being honest with what our capabilities really are to drive that change. And when we can't, we also have a group of people that look outside of ourselves and say, who can we partner with to go be more successful? And in many instances, it is some of these startups. where we're tackling a particular issue around, sortation or, whatever that is, having the visibility once we know we need to look outside ourselves, understanding what we want to tackle in particular, and go search. We've got these search fields that we look outside of ourselves to determine, and we reach out and we talk, and we have plug and play and other partners like that in order to scan and find and match ourselves with who we think are going to be the big bets, right? The people that we want to partner with and have the same vision and values in order to help meet our goals, which is always, how do you do it in a way that is going to meet the needs of our customers in a way that makes sense, that helps us meet our goals from sustainability perspective, business perspective. We're looking for good growth, and who are the partners that are going to enable that?
Mm-hmm. So I think we talked a lot about the importance of the partnerships. I think we're all aligned here that no one can do it on their own. But Louise, maybe over to you. How do we create greater transparency in those partnerships? Also maybe related to the supply chain issue. How can we make it more transparent to everyone involved? Ooh, I think she's frozen now. Okay, maybe we can move over to one of the corporates. Oliver, maybe you can jump in here from a BASF perspective. What's important from your side? What are your expectations towards these partnerships?
I mean, transparency, you mentioned that, Felix, that's really a key word, I believe. Yeah, in the end, we have to really learn that we have to give information to also receive information. That's not typical corporate, because we're always afraid of our competitors and a competitive situation in the market. But this needs to change, yeah? Because if only we alone try to find solutions, they will not work out. Yeah? So we have to really implement the entire value chain. And because what might be a good solution from our perspective might not if we involve both the others. So it's about transparency. It's not easy to do that. Probably I want to mention here that we are a part in this industry alliance, Catena X. I guess that's also known. Yeah, I mean, there we exactly discuss on these topics currently. Yeah, so if people provide data, I mean, who has access to the data? Yeah? Is it all having access to all data? Is it one up, one down? And this is things that we have to really discuss, and then we have to conclude on that. And in the end, it's clear it needs to be a win-win situation. Yeah, so it's not helpful if top-down we get targets and we all should run for these targets, but there's nothing in for the other players in the value chain. So that must be clear from the beginning. And I guess if we see this as a team approach, then it's also not so hard to be more transparent than what we've been in the past.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I think, Oliver, you already mentioned there are also some different approaches, I should say, along the value chain, such as the Catena X program, for example. Let's talk a bit more about the collaboration with startups in terms of a corporate perspective and in terms of digital solutions required. Why is this so important for you guys in the big corporates?
Yeah, probably I can add something. I mean, I mentioned that before. Yeah? I mean, in the end, the startups, they bring different working style. They are super agile, super fast, and this is not necessarily the case in a huge company. No? And probably you can try out things together with a startup outside of a company IT system that we would never be able to implement on short notice inside BASF, for example. No? But you can try out somewhere outside in a sandbox, and then you can also adjust and optimize towards customer requirements, because that's really important. Susanne also mentioned that in the end, it's all about customer centricity. No? So it's never standalone solutions that we love as BASF, but our customers don't. And I believe it's the agility, and it's really being really fast working with startups. So I guess that's really key.
Great, thank you. And I see Louise, you're back. I hope you can hear us again. So we just talked and expanded a bit on the topic of the collaboration and the partnerships in order to break down and tackle this challenge in the end. So Oliver mentioned from a corporate perspective the importance of transparency also for these partnerships. Maybe you can share some of your experiences here, how important transparency is for these partnerships.
As our business is supply chain transparency, obviously it's massively super important. Yeah, I think the challenge is often also there's sort of like startup wording and corporate wording. So sometimes I really feel we're talking about two different things. A partnership, for example, yeah, it's a great word again, and then different meanings behind that if you're a corporate or a startup. Yeah, I think for us what always really worked very well, our first sort of like pilot case was with Volvo Cars. So that was sort of like a POC, as Oliver said, tracking tantalum from the mine to the manufacturer. 4 years later, Volvo was one of our main customers, and we increasingly scaled, and this is what I said, the scope of our collaboration. I think as of now, it's 8 resources that we are tracking for Volvo in their supply chains. And so that is basically climbing up the ladder slowly but surely. Transparency is important. We talked about honesty, both on the budget side, expectation side, but also on the what is challenging. And I think what you can also use and for startups, and that is something nice, of course, they're small and agile and fast working. But the great thing about startups is that they are passionate. And that is something which is a bit missing in corporates, you know, and not saying the two of you, because you both seem very passionate. And but it's often, of course, you're coming there and you're so happy about finally having that conversation, and there's a lot of passion behind it. And I think that is also very important when it comes to sustainability, because what we said in the beginning, passion helps to overcome difficulties. And when you're not passionate and you meet a difficulty, that might be like, not doing it, you know. So that is also a point I wanted to add to what Oliver just said.
Great, thank you, Louise. So I think we already covered a lot today, but in the final 5 minutes of our breakout session today, I do want to take the chance to also give a future outlook from your perspective to the audience listening today. So maybe we can go around, and maybe Suzanne, you can start and tell us how we can all shape a sustainable world going into the future.
Oh, wow. What a big question, right?
Yeah.
It's doing the next right thing. We have these big ambitions. We have to put it into bite-sized steps that we can, start down this journey or continue this journey. I think about, we know that we need to expand and build on circular business models, right? And we know that we need strategic partnerships in order to do that. We know, and when I think about the world that we want to help create is leveraging startups as an enabler to help us unlock some things like transparency within our supply chain, even within our own business. We have a goal to be able to fully articulate to our customers the sustainability impact of the products that we sell them, which means we have to sort of build transparency within our own operations. And it's a shift of how we do business. We've just assumed certain things, right? And so that's when, to me, in the future, we're able to have, and it's actually something that Novelis is really good at, having the difficult conversations. We have a value called say anything. You're allowed to challenge respectfully. And that allows you to have those difficult conversations and have a point of view and challenge the norm and the status quo, which, may or may not exist in, sort of in every corporate culture. But Louise, you're right. I think passion and enthusiasm, and I will also say from a Novelis perspective that we are all in on this, and we're trying to figure this out. We think we have a plan to get to 2026 and 2030, but it gets murky, right? It gets, murky past 2030, and we know that we have to unlock a whole bunch of different value and solutions for our customers and how we continue to deliver to them. And so it's going to take new technologies that drive in that transparency. It's going to, create more opportunities to bring more scrap back, dismantling processes, sortings, all that fun stuff, and so that we are able to deliver on these commitments that we've stated very, very publicly. So, it's exciting. Like I said before, it's not easy. It's complex and it's challenging, and we're ready to kind of dig in and do it. So I'm excited about our future.
Great. And Oliver, before we hear your final statement or your future outlook, I want to pick up on a quote that you mentioned in one of our previous meetings, which I think was really inspiring, that we can only solve the challenge of net zero with all partners along the value chain together. So all working together, no one can do it on their own. So how does this fit into your future outlook?
Yeah, we really believe in this statement. Yeah, first thing is definitely we all have to step out of our comfort zones. Yeah, that's what Louise mentioned before. Yeah, so there will be some tough times to really go to net zero, but we have to cope with the challenge. And yes, Felix, we have to achieve that together. And one thing which I find very important is we have also to rethink our economy, because we're talking about linear value chains today, a linear economy, and on the other hand, we're talking about a circular economy. So that probably doesn't fit together anymore. And I have a background in digitalization of businesses as well, and there we're talking about platform businesses as well. So probably also this is part of the solution in the end, that we have to see who can offer the best solution for the next step to take, because it's several steps, as Suzanne said. We of course can have this ambition net zero, but we have to do the little steps to come there, because otherwise doing only the big steps will not work. In chemistry, as mentioned, we will have some technology changes. There will be some big steps, but a lot of smaller steps as well.
Mm-hmm. And Louise, with all your experience from sort of both sides, from both perspectives, looking at the challenge, what are your thoughts about the future? I will give the final statement to you.
I think next level of corporate action is in supply chains. It's still it's almost untouched. So there's still like a massive chunk of opportunity. Others would say big problems, but I'm always saying it's big opportunities that are waiting for all of us in the supply chain, and unmessing what has been messed around with in the last decades. And part of that is eco-design, what Suzanne mentioned. Products have been on purpose been unequally designed because when it was broken, you had to throw away the entire thing instead of exchanging one component. So invisibility in supply chains was also a thing that have corporates done on purpose, because it's easier, because it provides protection, right? And these excuses are not there anymore. There is technology in place to bring transparency, and that doesn't mean entire visibility, but transparency into supply chains. And tackling the supply chain, I think that's the future. And this will bring us the next big jump towards a sustainable future.
Very inspiring last words. Thank you very much to all three of you joining today. I think we've covered a lot today, a lot of the current challenges from a corporate perspective, also from a startup and scale-up perspective. I think very inspiring final words here. Let's all work together to reach net neutrality and really tackle this big challenge. So I would like to give a big thank you to our panelists today joining us, and with that, I think we're already over time. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining this session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. You've done a great moderating job as well.
Thank you, guys.
Both of you, Suzanne and Oliver. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.